Hello and welcome to Lightways at Life Astrologer with me, Anna Isabel, and I am very happy to be welcoming back Richard Swatton. Hello, Richard.
Hello there. I've just decorating my office, so it's a new background and everything else. So and it's looking pretty good. But I noticed there's a glare there. Is that too much of a problem?
No, I think we're fine. We can see you.
Okay, that's good.
Well, it's wonderful to have you back, and you very kindly agreed to return to talk about this beautiful book called Astrological Counselling by Christina Rose. And here it is. Um,
Here is the original version.
you've got the original version.
Of course.
And funnily enough, I have that version too. Um, so, but I particularly like this picture.
Yes.
It kind of says everything in a sense. Um,
Well, it illustrates Christina's very clear appreciation of Dane Rudhyar, and she uses many of the metaphors that every planetary placement is like a seed, but the whole thing is like a seed developing into who you are. And so everybody is an individual tree, as Kabbalism or the tree of life tells us. So we're blossoming, we're growing, and that the horoscope is in many ways not just potentials and needs and motivational forces, but seeds of life growing in particular ways. And that was Dane Rudhyar. And she uses that throughout. And in fact, in the acknowledgements, she has more Rudhyar books than she has Liz Green books, if you see what I mean. But so she was a particularly good exponent of Dame Rudhyar's lunation cycle and the phases of development in that. So Christina was very hot on the tail of humanistic astrology, psychological astrology, but also that verging on this philosophy of the development of the human individual becoming paramount. Yes, or an important, not just the individual, but don't get me wrong, individuation is not just about becoming yourself. It's about taking your place in society, in relationships, but only when you've individuated. Otherwise, you're thrown off course by the collective, which is a Jungian idea. And obviously, Christina was steeped in Jung. She was steeped in psychotherapy. She was all of those kind of things. So I'm sorry, we're off at the gate. But that picture that you showed me, two trees relating to one another within the context of an astrological consultancy, so that it was a shared experience if you had skills as a counselor. And that's what it's all about. And one of the very first books to appear on the scene, to change the course of event-oriented astrology. She uses that phrase too in the introduction, I think, to a more developmental form to help you understand yourself, your seed potentials, as Rajah would say, and all those wonderful metaphors. So that's a great opener, that book. And I haven't got the new one, but I do have this one, and it's still, you see the two people there, still the same basic idea, and there's the connecting, planets and the stars in between them and so on. So yeah, I think it's great.
well, it's funny because you're talking about the idea of seeds, etc. Because I had highlighted a quote to read, and it goes like this. In this respect, a good and frequently used analogy is of a seed packet bearing a picture of the plant or flower whose seeds are intended to become. By working with his birth chart, the individual can trace and become acquainted with the nature of the basic processes and drives, the seeds, he manifests in his life as general or specific experiences as he develops, plant or flower. By further analogy, he can conceive of his life more as a tapestry of interwoven colors, textures, and patterns, with himself as the central weaver, not as a purposeless, chaotic jumble, which he just has to get through somehow. And you were talking about the very thing that struck me is that beautiful analogy. And you were also talking about the need for us to know who we are so that we can actually find our place in society, in relationships and in society. And this is, I think, the stuff of perhaps most of the consultations, astrological consultations that I do, where people are wondering, basically, how do they fit in? And how do they express who they are in the wider world? And are they allowed to express who they are in the wider world? It's that thing about understanding who I am and then where I fit in.
The two are different parts of the same question in a way. That's sorry. That's a bit of a bad way of putting it. But finding your place in the world, often we get asked about vocation, what should I be doing in life, and so on. That comes about by following your inner star, by knowing or following through on your diamond, on your inspirations. And you might not know when you're younger what you might not know when you're, but where's the libido? Where follow your bliss, as Joseph Campbell used to say, follow that. Something is coming from you. And if you follow it, you find out, and that's coming from you. And it suggests that you do this, or it suggests that you do that. And that may or may not turn into a profession. But profession isn't the only criteria of being who you are. I happen to have a vocation, but I didn't select it from the horoscope. It came about through a series of necessities. Do you see? So finding out who you are in a way is concomitant, is a parallel process in doing what you do in life. Now, I've always said when people talk to me, ask me about vocation in astrology, your vocation, this is going to stretch out, but vocation can be not necessarily glamorous, not necessarily being on a stage or writing a book or appearing in a play or holding court, or being a famous this or a famous that. That's completely wrong. If that happens, it's because of some kind of fluke that the collective wants you to be known. Vocation can be in a sense of determining certain qualities of being. Now, that's not often done in astrology, the qualities that you bring to life, because you never know who you are for people, what importance you're playing in their life, not just children or your neighbors or your friends, but people, the way you hold yourself. And that is a more spiritual element. And all of the planetary placements have certain qualities. Leo has magnanimity, a sense of generosity of spirit, of heart. It is full of emotion. The Cancerians have a quality of solicitude. They look for what's wrong. They look for the weaknesses in people. They seem to have a mothering quality about them that wants to take care of innate potentials. It's the sign before Leo. That's the mother. It cares for, and Leo is the producer of the innate seed of the individual. So we shouldn't go all around them, but Aquarius has to do with solidarity. Now that may seem strange. It's an old word stretching over from the socialist movement, but solidarity of purpose and being. We all are in humanity as a whole. We're all human. Let's work together in this solidarity of being to make life better, more ethical, more fair, more just, all those wonderful things. But aiming towards that the brotherhood of man and of Aquarius, of a humanitarian center. That's the quality, see? The quality of Pisces is compassion. The quality of Sagittarius is the idea that life progresses towards something by discovery. Now, these aren't bits and pieces, just interpretations. These are very quality of being, and that's a different type of astrology. But Christina borders on that also. She's talking about individual problems, but the essence of it, if you like, is to find your self-expression in these different ways, whether it's in vocation or whether it's just in the qualities of your being, ethical practice or whatever it is. And you can be that and be a no one in the world, but still be yourself and be satisfied that you are being as you should be. And sometimes the astrology can point towards qualities of being, you see, as opposed to just doing things and all that. So vocation is a big thing, but it needn't be, as I say, overblown with fame or your path paved with stars and glamour.
Two things come to mind listening to you. The first is a reading that I did for a client a few years ago, who was a cleaner, and she loved being a cleaner. That was, she loved it because she was supporting people, helping people. It was not a glamorous vocation, but very clearly it was her vocation.
Yes.
And the chart was full of Virgo.
Yes.
That was, as you might expect. It was a heavy Virgo side to it. But the other thing that came to mind as you were talking about qualities is that very often when I am working with people who, and I do this especially with youngsters, when parents bring me adolescents and teenagers, and they are struggling because they're struggling in school and they don't find a great deal of validation in the world at this point. I always begin by asking them, well, what qualities do you like about yourself? And I think that word qualities, those qualities it's just such an important word, and the concept that comes with it. Because very often, as you say, we are focused on the action and the result. And because that's what's going to get us the brownie points, the validation that we're craving. But it has to come from something that's within us. And that's the qualities. And I think, and you're right, each sign has a quality, with Virgo, the quality of being helpful and being of service. And that was what was driving. And this client of mine who expressed that quality through cleaning.
Well, the satisfaction of Virgo had a very fundamental root. Was I think best expressed by Ray Charles, the great singer and pianist, the jazz singer, blind pianist and singer, great. And he in an interview, and I never forgotten it. He said, somebody asked him something. He said, "Why do you get up in the morning?" He said, "I seek to perfect my instrument." His voice, his piano playing, his performances. And by perfect, he means do it to the best of your ability, to have that quality of being that you have applied yourself, not just to technique and learning this thing, but you've done a good job. And that good job is in harmony with the repair function of the universe. It repair. That's what it's to do with bodies and cleaning as such. But precision precision. So the thing is that the Virgo needs to do it as best they can, because they're serving that pattern within Virgo, which is, of course, is the final unfolding of the individual seed from Aries through to Virgo. And then we get into the mechanics of self and other with Libra and so on. But Virgo has a particular thing to do with the perfection of the individual themselves. It is the sign, actually, of individuation, which means completion, discrimination of your own qualities, and then putting them all together into a functional whole that works in the world. And you see, the signs are amazing like that when you go into the depth of them. But we're getting a bit away from dear old Christina here.
Yes and no.
Okay. Yeah.
We kind of are, but we're not, because I think we're in the essence of the spirit of the astrological counseling. And that brings me to
Yes.
the next quote that I wanted to share, because I thought it really held something important. More recently has come the growing recognition that the act of interpreting a birth chart is only of limited value unless the client can be involved in that process as well as the astrologer, and can be guided into possible ways of utilizing the information from the chart once it has been presented to him. And I think that is in essence, the heart of what those of us who call ourselves psychological or therapeutic astrologers are doing. It has to, that's the magic, I think. It's that dynamic of possibilities, and then, or presenting the possibilities and then hearing what the client has to say.
Yes. Well, and she was at the beginning of those voices of moving from a fatalistic, event-oriented astrology towards an involvement of yourself in it. The fate isn't just there. Till started it. Actually, I think Grant Louis started it, and then Dame Roger with his personal humanistic astrology and so on, I think in the 60s. But he wasn't a therapist. You see, he was more of a philosopher, astrologer. I'm sure he did readings. He did a reading for the singer Elvis Presley once. And so on. So you never know who astrologers have influenced and so on, because people don't like to say they've been to see an astrologer. But she was at the forefront of that, and so clients would go to astrologists and they would basically ask, "What are the planets going to do to me? What are they going to do to me? What's that transit going to do? I've got a Pluto transit. Oh, I'm going to die. Or I'm going to fear, or whatever. Or Saturn transit. You're in for a great deal of hardship." See, that's what the planets are going to do something. No, the planets are there to invite you into participation with your own life through the placement. And that's the difference from fate-oriented, event-oriented influences upon you, which is still prevalent in astrology. You say, "Oh, what's that going to do, to me?" And it invites you, as I say, to take up the mantle of the symbol, embody it in your life through understanding, and, in my work, action. What are you going to do about it? This I got from Noel Till. What are you going to do with it? You see Jupiter coming up to your MCU, you go, "Oh, that's nice. I'm going to be rewarded for my work, or it's a nice thing in my career." No. Start self-promoting, get a website, do something so people can come to see you. Jupiter is an expression of moving yourself out in the larger light of day, moving beyond the known and into the unknown of further advancement or discovery of yourself. What are you going to do about that? Write a book, publish something, distribute yourself to a larger, travel to another country and set something up. It invites, do you see?
Yes, and that's making me smile because your description has made me think of the title that I gave to um, courses that I'm running, looking at transits and understanding transits, and I have called it Working with the Gods.
Yes.
Because it is exactly about that. It's
Mm.
understanding the energy so that we can actually engage with it and work with it,
Mm.
um, rather than feeling like something is being done to us. Because really, what we're looking at is seeing everything as an opportunity to engage and grow through that engagement. And I think this concept has been there all along. Um, there will have been astrologers throughout history who have had that concept, and
Of
and I
course.
think astrology is a tool with many functions. And there is a time and a place, when you want to think things through, to see an horary astrologer. There
Mm.
is a time and place when you're going to need perhaps an electional reading. But this is
Mhm.
something else. What we're looking at is something else. This is about opening the doors to understanding ourselves and our
Mm.
place in the world. And I think this is where the beauty of this book comes in, because it is exactly about how we can do that.
Yes. And she does say, in fact, somewhere in the book, I can't remember where, that there are different types of astrology, and astrology really is the base, and then how you apply it depends on your own peculiarity. If it's mundane or political astrology, medical astrology, horary, divination, electional astrology, which is very quite magical, or if it's counselling. And counselling and psychotherapy, depth psychotherapy, came in with really Liz Green, 1976. New look at an old devil. Till brought in behavioral and sociological astrology in the 1970s with his principles and practice of astrology, essentially involving you in the chart, and seeing that without a dialogue with your client, which is exactly what Christina's talking about, you don't know the individual life frame. You can't achieve every potential of an astrological placement because you are grounded also in certain limitations of education, money. Maybe your body doesn't function so well because you've inherited something. Yes, or you've had to go through a difficult childhood, and so your potentials have been um, crowded into a lot of psychopathology and trauma and the rest of it. So we don't know what the reality frame of the client is, and she makes that point. It's a dialogue. I don't know your reality frame, so how in your life is this going to be expressed, or for that matter, is it possible to be expressed in any particular case? Do you see?
It's
So Sun in the 10th suggests that you're going to be fulfilled in a functional way if you find the right profession, and who you are intrinsic to expressing who you are. So know who you are, then, or do you see what I mean? That's it. But some person might not have any qualifications. Well, what? So that doesn't mean to say you can't involve yourself in your profession. What are you going to do? Saturn in the 10th suggests you've got to be your own boss because you can't stand being told what to do by other people. Right. So or you feel under oppression when you're being told what to do in a set structure, in a set form. So be your own boss. What's that going to involve? A lot of discipline, practice, getting your skills, your trade, whatever it is of that Saturn, and then being in command of your own profession and your own autonomy. You have enough autonomy to not feel as if you're under pressure apart from yourself. So again, it's a very practical astrology, but I wouldn't know. And she's saying, I don't know your reality frame. So what is it? And the only way you can do that is to get involved in a relationship. And she has several examples of people, or one, for example, is very unconfident in there, and I think she talks about a Venus Neptune or something, and the person is too engrossed in being, well, this happened to me and this happened to me. She's got into the victimization mode of the Neptune. Yes, instead of trying to transform her emotional experiences into some aesthetic, some Venusian quality to do with fashion or clothes or hairstyles or anything else of the expression of that Venus. So um, that's what it was about: engagement in the personal life, and ridding the astrologer of the mantle of an all-knowing self that's going to tell you what to do so you can avoid the responsibility of doing it. Because my astrologer told me. This is what a lot of people do with tarot. What should I do? What decision should I make? Well, I always say to them, and I do it, I look up on my chart and think about this and that, but I still have to make the decision to believe what the astrology says. So ultimately, if it tells me, if the card turns over and it says that, I still have to make the decision about whether to follow that advice. So ultimately, it does come down to the individual, but because she was a counselor, she had certain practical skills to which can focus in on problems. She even confronts this woman from avoiding doing something, and she could be forward, not just this nice counselling. Oh yes, you've had a hard time. I think although confrontations become rather, not frowned upon, but you don't, because we live in a very litigious. Well, he told me he made me upset. Well, sometimes you should make people upset, um, or engage being upset because that's where the energy is. Astrologers and therapists can always be wrong, but it should be in a. It can be a good thing to be wrong and to be told off, and to see how the astrologer or the thing or the counselor takes embarrassment, shame, and everything, and admits that. You see what I mean? It's an arena in which lots of psychodynamics can take place, and she wasn't scared of that.
When I was training as a hypnotherapist, um, I remember our teacher saying to us, your clients are not paying you to make them comfortable. And I think it was a reminder of the fact that we do need sometimes to challenge, albeit gently and sensitively, but we do need to, because sometimes we need to dislodge ourselves from a position, and it's difficult for us to do that ourselves. We need somebody else to help us. Just give us that little nudge or push out of that, and that can be uncomfortable, but that's where progress sometimes really comes in. Other things you were saying, and I think it's context. The idea of context is so important. When my students are first learning, they feel like they have to interpret the chart and that there's a right or a wrong answer. And I keep saying, no, that's not your job. Your job is to present possibilities, to interpret the possibilities. The person knows the context, and it's together that you arrive at something, because they have the context of their lives. And really what you're doing is you're stimulating the imagination, stimulating different perspectives, so that the person can take those perspectives, and the person can take the symbolism and work with it, do something with it, because they're the ones.
Yes. I agree with that, except again, in one of the case studies, she recognizes that to some degree, the person really hasn't come from an astrology reading. And this is where the counseling approach, you may, because the person may be in trouble, she doesn't know how to, or the he or she doesn't know how to say that, they go to an astrology reading for advice or something, and really they want a shoulder to cry on or somebody to really listen to them and understand. And it's at that point that she says sometimes you have to put the astrology reading aside, just put that down, because what's in front of you is more important than what you have to say, you see. And then you might come back to, and I have to do that because people are in emergency situations, and so it we may have our framework ourselves for how a consultation might go, but a client might change that. Now, I don't think you should be flaky, but
No.
if necessity calls, then and the person is really upset. I mean, I had one client I remember strongly many years ago when I lived in Clapham. And as they spoke, and we started talking about 20 minutes in, they started to not make any sense in their words. And I realized they'd been into a psychotic episode. They were dissociated. They were talking about fantasies and everything else. And, you know, it was a very strange circumstance because, you know what a non sequitur is. A non sequitur is when a person says something different from what you've asked. So there is no continuation of the statement. They were going off, so it's very strange. And so I had to kind of put that down and hopefully move them back into a rational frame. And because I like things recorded, by the way, and Christina always made a point about that. Please record the session. That helps the astrologer not be sued because you have the evidence there, and it helps the person reflect. You see, and that wasn't done years ago because I think readers, they don't like recordings because just in case they say something, it doesn't come true. You know,
Always, always record. It's so funny because you're reminding me of a reading I did a couple of years ago in which at one point I realized something was wrong, that what I was hearing sounded very much like paranoia in a fantastical sense.
yes.
And I had to work through that, and as you say, try to bring things back. And this is really about dealing with what presents itself, because whatever we might think we are doing, because we're here working as an astrologer, we are also dealing with the other person, and very, very similar in the sense to when I'm just wearing the therapist's hat, I have to deal with what presents itself. And that was a very interesting experience. And I subsequently learned that the individual in question was experiencing deep paranoia at different times, and that there was concern for them around that issue. And that, that happens, and we have to always be prepared. So this is as much a listening exercise as it is a presentation exercise. And
Well, yes, it can be, but here we're on not dicey ground, but with the traditional astrologers, because you don't have to be a counselor and a psychotherapist to give a very good reading. But what at all? You might be a psychic, and you might use this as a tool from which to develop your psychism with a person. You might do a 20-minute reading. You might do an hour and a half reading. And this was Maggie Hyde's point. To be a good astrologer, you don't have to be a good therapist or a counselor. You don't have to do this kind of approach. That's our type of approach, perhaps, or a humanistic, but you needn't be. You can be an excellent astrologer and provide a service, but what you need to know is what service you provide and what you don't.
Exactly. And that
And
comes
do you
back
see? So people going into
to
psychological astrology and counselling, in my opinion, really need to have done a counselling course to get an idea of what this interplay between self and other is. Otherwise, don't do that type of astrology. Be the strange man or woman at the end of the street that does astrological readings. Do you see?
absolutely.
Um,
It's as I say again, everything comes back to context, and it comes back to what we were talking about, astrology being a tool that is used in different ways. So we are specifically talking about astrology for the use for therapeutic
yeah.
purposes. After all, the title of the book, as I remind everyone, is Astrological Counselling. So there
Well,
is.
when I opened it and I reviewed it for today, look, I found this Christina Rose because she was the first person I went to for an astrology reading in
Yeah.
the early 80s. See, in 1982, when let's have a look. Yes, Christina Rose, 1982 was the copyright, you see, and then it came out in 1983 with the Aquarian Press. Along with people like, let's look, we've got Sheila Geddes, Martin Freeman, Forecasting in Astrology, Michael Begent, Iligas Cambion, Natal Charting, Penny Thornton. I was doing a book on synastry. This was a very good series. They did Derek Appleby on orrery. There was a great, I thought Aquarian Press was very good. I think they did Marion Green too, the to do with Wicca. And I found this in it, which is what she gave. This is which was her addresses. She's passed on now, so these addresses are different. But she had London appointments, the Hillside Practice, which is where I went, Highgate Road, Herefordshire, which is the Ashdown Clinic, the Well House, Berkhamsted, right? And she did various things, and she was, I think, either not a founding member, but she had a particular interest in the School for Transpersonal Astrology, which was in 1982-83. She references it in the back. And that's where Liz Green was and House of Supporters, and that eventually turned into the CPA, right? Around about 1983-84 was the CPA, Centre for Psychological Astrology, of which she was often an invited guest. And I met her there many times in when I was a student there between 85 and 88. So just to give a bit of background, and I like the first chapter, Astrology in Transition. It's transiting from predictive, mundane astrology, a bit spooky, into a practical use of guiding people into better self-development and choices.
And I think that is very clear throughout the book, this idea of transition. And I am just going to remind everybody one more time that the book we are discussing is called Astrological Counselling
Yes.
by Christina Rose. And I think it's well worthwhile to read it, particularly if you are interested in psychological or therapeutic astrology. Richard, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and your experiences on this lovely book.
Has it gone quick? It's gone quick. There's some brief stuff in there on the planet. She does that. It's not a complicated book in terms of astrological counseling techniques. She gives a few examples, but we remember it's 1982, so this is this transition, if you like, to in developmental developing astrology in a more with more depth of psychological development and growth. And she was instrumental in that, alongside Liz Green, Alistair Sportus, Martin Freeman, Penny Thornton, all of those people that were around at that time in the forefront of astrology.
So it was a particularly lovely opportunity to be able to read this book again and to discuss it with you. Thank you so much, Richard.
Thank you. Been nice. It went all too quickly, Sanji.
It
Thanks.
always does. Richard, if people wants to find you, how do they do that?
Well, they can. I think my telephone number is on the LSA website. I don't have my own website at the moment, which is silly of me. Or they can contact you, and if you don't mind,
Yes,
and then you can do it on the email. I far prefer contact on my telephone number. So anybody contact you, just give them my telephone number, and then that'll be you won't have to type an email out and everything else. So do feel free.
wonderful. Thank you very much, Richard. And thank you all for watching. Do remember also that in the description box, there will be a link to the book, as well as a link to the London School of Astrology, so that you can also find Richard there,
Okay.
and a link to my website and my Substack, where you can find out more about courses that I'm running, plus, of course, the writing that I have been doing. Until next time, during which we will be looking at the zodiac. Have a great week, but goodbye.
Cheerio. Bye bye.